So let's go ahead and start this meeting with roll call, please.
Councilors Van Gordon,
Here.
Moe,
Here.
Moore,
Here.
Chair,
Here.
Woodrow,
Here.
Missionary.
Here. Thank you, AJ. So this first part, we will start off with the what the heck? Is this the work session? Are we going with the downtown upgrades?
This is Courtney Griesel. We're going with the electric service upgrades first.
Oh, there we go. Thank you, Courtney.
And I am going to start here. I'm going to share my screen. Apologize for the delay. Can you all see my screen? It's a mess right now. I know that.
Yes.
I can see it. Yes.
Okay. Sorry, now I apologize. I'm moving things around so I can see you and my screen. It's just too much tech on one little screen. So this evening, we're here talking about downtown electrical voltage, specifically the power that runs throughout downtown, kind of that backbone power system serving downtown businesses and residents. I'll note that I do have Sanjeev King in the audience from Springfield Utility Board, as well as Jeff Nelson. These are folks who are far smarter than I am around the technical nuts and bolts of this stuff, but I'm going to try and make them cringe as little as possible. Let's see if I can get this to advance. There we go. What we have currently is our downtown, which is really the oldest region of Springfield, right? This is where, you know, businesses really first started and mills, and there is a backbone power system in that downtown that is somewhat antiquated. What I will note is that every business and residence currently in downtown is being served adequately today. They're being served safely. They are able to turn on light switches and serve the community and do good. The issue is really coming up when those properties are desiring to plug in much larger systems or expand or create a bigger demand on the power generation. And in that case, what we have is we have a low voltage issue in our backbone that is not adequately set up right now to quickly be modified to serve those demands. And so in some cases, what that creates is it can take time to design the modification to the building. It can also be expensive. And SUB is starting to look at this proactively to understand what would it take if they went in and made that upgrade in the backbone system so that they could really be very ready when a property in downtown was ready to expand, redevelop, add new tenants, etc. Sorry, there we go. So this is kind of a rough image of what we're talking about when we say backbone. We're really talking about this power that is running in the grid throughout downtown, and then each individual building or business is jumping off of that main line to power their entire system. And right now, those two systems speak. So they're talking the same voltage, the technology speaks to each other, and therefore it works. If SUB were to come in and do a substantial upgrade to that line in the alley, the yellow, what we then find is those buildings don't talk to that system any longer without being converted themselves. And so that's sort of the double-edged sword of being proactive. We're being proactive, we're doing good things, we're getting ready for redevelopment, but we may have rendered the existing systems plugged into it in need of upgrades themselves. And that can be expensive, especially to those private businesses or building owners. So SUB is really proposing right now a partnership with us that looks like an assessment of what it would actually take to do those conversions, acknowledging what it would do to those private property owners who are currently using that system. So assessing not only block by block, what would it cost to upgrade it, but also block by block, what would the financial impact to those businesses be? And what are some ways that we could partner to support that? I think ultimately a partnership to support voltage conversion has not yet been asked by SUB financially of us. This is just sort of an early glimpse at work that they're doing, and we want to be mindful of where it could ultimately go. This is an image of a phased strategy that SUB is proposing, really looking at what are the initial blocks they might assess. Blocks number 1 being that 3-block section, and I realize I'm using my hands for nonverbal and you can't see me, so I'll sit on them. Blocks number 1 really were driven because that is where we've seen historically a lot of interest from property owners interested in redevelop, and that's where a lot of the questions have come historically. That said, there are not a lot of businesses at this moment in time asking SUB for additional power, but we also know there's a lot of other things happening to businesses right now. So I wouldn't take that as a sign that it's not needed in the future. So SUB is proposing to approach it in this order, kind of 1, 2, block 3 being between Mill and Pioneer, and then up to block 4 and 5 on A Street after that. And they're also proposing they would cover that cost of the assessment of their infrastructure. They're also proposing to bring on a consultant to do some assessment of the financial impacts to the private properties as well. They're not asking us to financially support that. They're proposing to do that themselves. But we do know that that will mean we'll understand what the future might look like for this conversion. So.
Courtney,
And then,
are you ready?
Yeah.
Can you take a question?
Absolutely, yeah.
The map I'm looking at, block number, or the number 2 includes the school.
It does. No,
So
block number 2 includes the Wildish Theater and hold on, I'm wrapping my head around block number 2. 5th Street is City Hall is on, so 6th Street goes under City Hall. So block number 2 would include the Wildish Theater and Bright Oaks.
And the school's across the street.
Yes.
And it's not included in this.
Correct.
Okay, so the school is not included in the upgrade?
No, but I could ask why that might be.
Yeah, I'm curious. The only reason I'm thinking that is I'm thinking of all the businesses that are in number 3. And I'm wondering why it's in the order it's in, although I realize this is just an initial thing.
Yeah, and I think SUB has been really open and communicative that some of the phasing could adjust. And this is phasing to do assessment. I think ultimately all of it would end up being assessed, but I can ask a couple more questions about what we're dealing with on the south.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So may I ask also?
Absolutely.
Matt, since we're looking at the map, what about the Justice Center?
Yeah.
That be included? Does it need to be included?
So I'm going to speak ahead. I believe not, but part of that, when you develop an entire block, and when a whole block comes in under redevelopment, oftentimes we upgrade the entire backbone system to serve that block. That's relatively new construction. So much of that infrastructure would have been included in that site work.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. I think I see Councillor Stair. Is that true?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I wasn't tracking where.
Whoops. Yeah, hey, Courtney. So I apologize if I missed this in the packet, but are we close to capacity at any part of our grid right now?
So I want to, No, yes and no. So in the general, at the point in which where the power is generated, kind of the power source is not. Sub has plenty of power to provide to future redevelopment. Our issue is really just in sort of that line that runs to the specific block needing to be upgraded. So not from a power generation or true sort of power source standpoint.
Thank you.
And I can't see my sub folks, but I'm always like, I'm waiting for a text, like they might be cringing if I say something just wrong. I know they'll let me know.
Leonard, we lost your view.
You lost my view?
No, I
No,
lost
Leonard.
Leonard's view.
Oh. I did notice.
There he is.
He's
There he
back.
is. Thank you.
So the only kind of last element that it's sort of just bringing it back to where we started, a couple years ago with the economic development strategy. Reason why we're having this discussion with you all from the economic development perspective is it just falls within our categories of infrastructure, our assets, and our competitiveness. Just making sure that we have the best real estate products and sites. So that's really the only reason that I put this up here. We're just always kind of testing what we're doing to make sure we're staying in the category of work that you have us doing. And this is really just more about what the nuance of that strategic plan kind of has us doing and why we do it. Otherwise, I think that's really what I had this evening on this. There's not a specific ask other than some feedback. We're interested in, like you shared on this phasing, your thoughts on this. Anything you're hearing, any concerns, any areas you want to make sure that we highlight. Our next step, if you all are supportive generally that we keep moving forward, would be to stay in close partnership to support sub in the assessment work. And then at the point when they have some understanding of the financial impacts of the project, come back to you, either the city council or CEDA, to have a discussion about what that means, what the future might look like if this were a project that required some financial support for private property owners, and just give you a clearer picture of what we're learning.
Go ahead, Steve.
I've been part of this. Been down there, walked the streets with Sanji and everything. And I think those spaces can be moved around if necessary, but I think they look pretty good. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to develop Springfield for the future economic development so we can have a thriving community. As I understand it, sub is willing to improve the lines, put in the power, and deliver that to the meter base on each building. And inside the building, that's where a power or a financial thing is going to be pretty iffy. So that's going to cost money. So, and that's what sub's going to look at that and determine what we need to do to help the property owners do that.
Yep. Thank you for that, Councilor.
I've got Marilee, followed by Sherry, followed by Sean.
Yes, that was what I was gathering from what you were saying, is that the assessment is going to give us a better idea cost-wise outside and in, probably give us an idea of what it might be for the property owners or the businesses on the inside. Is that correct? I mean, not that it's going to,
correct.
not that it's going to be detailed, but it's going to give us an idea what we're looking at.
Yeah, that is it. That is correct. And ultimately, sub will be making most of their modifications really to the transformers that they're using to serve those buildings. What we'll decide if they proactively go forward with upgrading those transformers will be if the entire block is able to convert their private systems. We wouldn't want to upgrade those transformers and render buildings obsolete of being able to use that power. So it will be, I think our next conversations will be very telling about what we learn. And that's why this phasing is valuable as well, because it will require conversations with property owners and Sub and the city, and we all want to talk about this together. And so I think we're very sensitive to whether this phasing makes sense. If you're okay with us starting with phase 1, that type of feedback as well.
Okay, thank you.
Sherry, it's your turn. Go ahead.
Question about that financing for those private owners. And my question has to do with what happens when we do infrastructure developments like sidewalks, and the homeowner has to pay for a portion of that. And I can't remember what it's called. We do a district,
An improvement district.
Right, an improvement district. So I wondered if that, because this is an infrastructure project, if that might come under that. I understand CETA might be able to come in as well, but if there would be some way in which homeowners or the business owners could purchase the improvements through some kind of an improvement district. If you could look into that in the
Yeah,
meantime.
I think we could look into that. I might talk with our finance director as well. What's interesting about this is that we really are talking about private improvements. And so we want to think through what that mechanism might be. Essentially, urban renewal is a version of almost an improvement type tool or district. It just gives us that ability to use the tool on private development, which is what makes it unique. So I think we'd want to look into that. I think this is a good note just to think through different ways we might create tools and add that to what we bring back to you.
So when in fact it might come to CETA, then CETA could look at ways of devising some ways of financing that improvement then that would maybe help or involve the owner as well.
Yeah, I think that's a strong point that we would all add some notes here and we make sure we do that. And when we talk about different ways of cost share or kind of support over time, just being mindful that the request is not right now from Sub is not requesting any support financially in their conversion, their voltage backbone. I think they're just truly kind of raising the flag that it will cause potential need on the private side. Sub is looking to bear the cost of their conversion.
Can I just say, wow, it looks, an amazing improvement, and again, comes right under that economic development umbrella of CETA. So thank you.
I have Sean followed by Steve Moe.
I have to say I'm supportive of going forward here. I know we're going to get the financing and the actual needs and actually have a long in-depth conversation. So a lot of the questions that I have about the how, I think you're going to come up with, in the future. Just in regards to downtown as a whole, right? Like, I think it's important that we sort of continue to get sites ready, right? Like, what has been successful in Springfield in the past really has been us doing all the legwork, getting ready for, for private industry to sort of pick up and grow and be involved. And I think we just, like, this is a good opportunity to get it done in these blocks because they've grown so much in the last couple of years, and I'd like to see them grow a lot more.
Steve, your turn, followed by Councilor Steer.
Yeah, Sub is ready and willing to upgrade the system. But they do want to make sure that the businesses don't move out and there's no users for it. So that's a delicate thing because there's financial stuff involved. So that's what we need to come up with, what it's going to cost.
Councilor Steer.
Thanks, Joe. So I hate to keep beating this drum, but Courtney, when do we project that we're going to be nearing capacity in these blocks that we're proposing to improve?
So what I would say is that we are at kind of a ceiling on some of these blocks already if redevelopment were to be proposed tomorrow. And when I say ceiling, I want to be sensitive. Sub could design a system to serve that redevelopment. They could find a solution. but it would be a one-off solution. It would take some time and it might be costly because it would be working around the voltage issues. So right now, all current businesses are safely and effectively served. We're just sort of we're at a threshold if somebody were to come in and need substantial expansion now.
If we were to approve this, when would the additional capacity be available to the businesses?
You know, I couldn't tell you that just yet. We'd need to get in and do this assessment on the systems in these different phases and then come back to you as soon as we have that issue. My sense is we're talking about at least a year's worth of work.
Does Jeff have a projection, or is he thinking a year or two?
I'm looking at my text thread to see if he's possibly feeding me some valuable information. I don't have that yet, but we can get it to you. I think our goal would be to move as quickly as possible. It's hard when we don't know yet the full amount of work to be done. I will say that some of this work will also require some easement work, some easement to be procured. So with private property owners, so it's far more complicated than my simple mind often tries to frame it.
Thank you.
So if I can comment, please. So in summary, I see that, I mean, all these questions are super good questions, but I think that they're going to be questions that will be able to be answered after this study, that we will all have that information. And I think we're kind of getting the cart before the horse in regards to that. To me, it appears as though it is a no risk situation for the city for them to do this because they're bearing all the cost. And that still puts us in the position to where after the study is done, we can pick that apart. And I assume, just like with Councillor Mo had indicated, that prices to have that power into the building can be iffy, quote unquote. And I agree. So, but we won't even know any of that. So this is, I think, just getting out of the starter gate, and we need to let that happen and get that information. We're not committing to anything really. We're just saying, okay, we're interested, do your study, and we would like to see that happen in a sense of giving us the flexibility for all these buildings to be able to improve themselves, put in new equipment that they can't do now. So it opens up a lot of opportunities, but we can't even really talk about that until we find out what Sub has and what kind of options that they have that I can tell. Am I off base on that, Courtney?
No, that's correct. And so tonight our goal would be to proceed really starting with phase 1 and start bringing you back those details that answer those questions. Well,
I fully support it, and I think give Sub the head nod. As far as I'm concerned, I'd like to see the head nods or thumbs up from the rest.
Yep.
Okay, I think we got full support, Courtney. Good job. Sub, go ahead and march forward.
Appreciate that. I'm gonna back out of this one. Do you want me to just start, or do you need to call that? Okay.
No, I think we need to go ahead and start with the next US Ignite grant and citywide fiber update topic, please.
Awesome. Just getting that set. There we go. Okay. So fiber, I'll note we're talking about fiber and voltage the same night because there was a moment in time where we thought the two were intrinsically tied. And we've learned a lot over the last several months. And so we'll kind of talk through why that is. But similar to the last one, just talking about how we got to where we are, why is economic development working on fiber? We're working on fiber because it was called out also in the strategic plan, talking about really the importance of affordable, accessible, high quality broadband access to households in Springfield as well as employers in Springfield. So just kind of my normal gut check. Are we still working on the things we're supposed to be working on? When we started this initiative under the strategy, we really talked about what are some ways to get after it, if you will. And a lot of it was to talk about some early wins, test the market, engage internet providers, work closely with sub to understand the dynamics of our existing infrastructure, and what's ultimately possible. When we first started the conversation, we really thought that downtown was going to be an interesting place to pilot some public fiber assets being leased to internet service providers under a certain system, really a hard system, meaning we would put fiber in the ground in multiple locations. And the thinking was that if we're also doing a voltage conversion, we could do that construction simultaneous. What we've learned is that there may be a couple different mechanisms for doing broadband in our community, and so that original built system may not be the most effective. So we'll talk about some of the ways we came to that conclusion. But just first, some celebratory stuff. One of the strategies, really, the tactics was capitalize on some low-hanging fruit, do some easier projects, create some wins, create some buzz, show internet service providers that it does make sense to expand into Springfield and offer affordable fiber in Springfield. So we have a couple examples in the last year and a half that have come to fruition. One being a fiber to the home project. Now this was tested in one neighborhood of Springfield where there was empty conduit to be used. What this really proved was that there are providers interested in doing this type of work. They can do it affordably and offer affordable prices, and they can create pressure on some of the big providers who are charging quite high rates and not always delivering world-class service. So this started to up that competition. This fiber was lit just here in June and July of this year. So this is a relatively new win for us. It's also shown to providers that the providers are starting to look at other similar neighborhoods with infrastructure like this to talk about replicating it. So this is positive for us, for sure. It's definitely brought providers to the table to talk with us. The other strategy is one that we received a grant to explore. This is a relatively small grant. In total, it's just under $100,000. It's a mix of some funding to do design as well as technology, actual equipment. This concept is funded by US Ignite, which is a National Science Foundation grant, granted program, and it looks at replicating or building off of regional fiber. So specifically in this case, we're talking about how do we connect Springfield to a main connection point that exists in Eugene at 859 Willamette. It's a building that's owned by Lane Council of Governments. Over the years, we've affectionately called it the WICS, although that has different meanings. But it's really a physical point in which fiber comes into a building from Portland area and then allows the larger region to have access to internet. The idea being in this grant, can you design a path from that physical point to a smaller physical point in Springfield that brings fiber even closer to our businesses and residences and gives internet service providers an even more affordable and closer location to branch their service off of? So that grant has been studying that path over the last 6 months and has gotten to a point where what we're calling a micro carrier hotel, you just picture sort of a physical closet, sort of a little tiny room. And in it, there's a lot of electronics that's plugging into the bigger room that exists at the Willamette. And that bigger room at the Willamette is actually plugging into an even bigger room up in Portland. And so it's just stepping down closer and closer to our community members. So we would picture that little location, and we're picturing it on a city hall, spot. So likely in a parking lot in City Hall. And I show this image to kind of talk about what we're thinking. So where you see the round circle, it's where the fiber is actually coming in from that Willamette building in Eugene. And if we can create our own closet, if you will, or H for hotel, and put it out to the edge, what we've just done is we've created a physical place for the internet service providers to plug into, and then to franchise or to expand their own equipment out to residences and businesses within proximity that they're comfortable financially or feasibly serving. What we've just pretty much done is we've just bridged them even closer to the community members. So over the next several months, the strategy would be to take the rest of that grant and work with an engineering firm to really design what this small closet might look like and what it might cost, and bring some of that information back to you all to assess. So should we construct this? The grant won't actually pay for the construction, it will pay for the design, and it will pay for some of the equipment to go into the closet, but it likely won't cover the construction costs. It won't. I shouldn't say likely. We know it won't. These are expensive buildings, but they really can do quite a lot for the community members by getting providers that much closer. It also would allow multiple internet service providers to jump off this point. So not just one, but 3 or 4 or 6. And so again, that just creates some competition. It sort of ensures that not one person's just monopolizing that access.
Okay, I've got Sean and followed by Sherry.
So then, Courtney, who actually owns or licenses that hotel?
Yeah, so, these are things we're actually in this assessment with the engineering firm. We have a group, technical team that includes our IT and capital engineers, as well as subs, Lane Council of Governments, and a handful of internet service providers. And we're having a lot of these discussions about who owns which parts of the system. So when we look at kind of that diagram in the bottom left corner, the city might own the actual carrier hotel because it is on our property. We might even own the equipment interior to it, although we might have LCOG own the equipment or sub could own the equipment. I think these are all things we would want to map out and talk about the pros and cons of who owns and what our agreements might look like with folks like LCOG, for instance, around managing the leases of an internet service provider having access to the building. There is also ownership of the actual path of the fiber. So sub or the city would need to lease the miles from the Willamette to this hotel in any of the fiber that we do not own. So there's kind of multiple relationships that would need to be contractually outlined. So no easy answer to your question, just a really good question and set of questions.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Sherry, your turn.
So help me just understand a little bit. So this is talking about hardwire as far as the hotel and what I'm seeing here in the downtown area. So what are we talking about with the Ambleside neighborhood? Was that a hardwire project as well?
Yes, so Ambleside was hardwired. It has less, so the way the competition worked in Ambleside, there's empty conduit to each home. Fiber was pulled through that conduit, but there's not necessarily room for multiple providers just because of the way it was done. There's a lot of equipment out in that neighborhood. So the competition occurred when Sub put out a competitive bidding process for which provider might be able to serve that neighborhood for a window of time. And Excess Media was the winning provider on that project. So what it shows us is there is competition, there was interest, there's a way to do that fiber directly to the home. It does take a lot of electronics to go that direction. And the competition needed to be on the front end. This concept pivots it a little bit and says, competition is only limited by space in this hotel. And it's up to the ISP to determine from this hotel point, how do they get to their customers? Some might decide to jump up onto overhead. Some might decide to take a hybrid that includes some wireless technology. And we really say to them, you propose how you want to serve to your customers. Your responsibility is to just franchise it or do it via permits with us and through a lease in this hotel, this closet.
So the individual citizens who might participate in this would purchase their internet connection through this, whoever is offering it. In my neighborhood, is there only going to be, so for instance, in the Mohawk neighborhood, we have a lot of businesses and banks and financial institutions who certainly could benefit from internet connection that would be, you know, a little less expensive, I'm sure. So just give me a kind of oversight. I know you don't know now exactly, but how would that work?
Well, so no, it's a really good question. So this concept here that we're looking at, you know, my instincts right now is that this may become the most replicable of the concepts between a micro hotel like this or an Ambleside model. This concept that we're looking at in downtown is really only going to serve a geography that is relatively limited to downtown and some of the surrounding residences of downtown, because it will be constrained by the ISP's cost to go from this hotel to the home or to the office. What that means is if we're thinking about this concept, we might start to evaluate what it would look like to locate similar nodes in multiple locations across the city. As we start to kind of understand how much of the gap does this hotel, this micro closet actually fill to get the carrier that much closer to the home. So it may be that we find a similar jump off point to this circle in the Mohawk area. And we say, okay, we're going to do it again. We're going to jump off this location, build a micro connect site, and then let ISPs lease from that point out and start to build those concentric circles throughout the city to see if we can create sort of a mesh or an overlay. And then it becomes a discussion about strategic locations of these micro hotels, and also thoughtful long-term operation of them. So if you build it and they come, we have to maintain it. And I think that becomes the element of what's a smart way to do that. Let's test it here potentially, but then let's be smart about how we long-term invest in a similar model.
Okay, so then my last question just has to do with financing this kind of a project, and it certainly sounds like it would be a CETA, would come under that economic development kind of financing that CETA provides. Is that correct?
Yes, this would be CETA eligible. This type of activity is within the plan, is an allowed activity. It doesn't have to be CETA funded, but the district is set up to support this type of work. I think that once we have a design, once we use this grant to do that design work and we can actually cost that facility out, then we may have a different discussion about what makes sense. Is it just CETA? Is it multiple? Kind of what is the council's perspective on that?
Okay, so then just one, jumping off of that. So we only have what, 3 CETA, we only have 2 economic districts at this time. Is that correct?
2 urban renewal districts, Glenwood and downtown. Yeah. So
it might be that we would look into expanding that into some of the other business areas of Springfield.
You know, I don't know that we would expand the urban renewal district just because there are restrictions on how much of your city can be urban renewal area. But I think what we would learn from this concept is how does it financially support itself?
Okay.
So, you know, there are leases. It would tell us a lot more about what it would take to finance some of these elsewhere or who might be involved to do it.
This sounds like a whole brand new area. We're just learning so much as we go along, correct?
Yes, we are learning a lot. Even very smart people, I'm watching them learn a lot about this, which makes me feel very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sherry, could you maybe turn your camera a little bit? Because we got like half a face of you and it's, well, there you go. Just something there. Oh, awesome. Thank you. So I had, did anybody, oh, Sean, you got some? Okay. Go ahead, Sean.
So still comfortable going forward here. I guess my question from a policy perspective, and again, it may just be we have to figure out the governance, right? Because at certain points, sub owns a portion of this, and is that to you all wrapped up in the conversation about who's really going to be championing and owning the fiber project?
Yeah, and I think so. That's actually gets to one of the other asks that I think is important. So we're talking about how the whole thing actually fits together, like how would it turn on and work? But that element of, but who owns what and how do we maintain in lockstep around what we believe and what we aim to do? It really still has to be discussed as well. And so, you know, sub is at the table requesting and sort of pointing to the need for a desire for some participation in a technical task force, sort of a joint group that includes sub-board members as well as a designated city councilor to really help navigate that discussion. So that's one of their asks to us as well.
Do we have an understanding about what their board's position is on this? Meaning, what, you know, how much investment that they were going to put into this, or whether or not their desire was to manage this as a for-profit enterprise?
I think Councillor Moe may have some good feedback as well because he's been at a lot of the tables. They have been fully supportive and all in at making this move forward. The tone that I have received from them has been that it does need to be profitable, but partly that aligns with what makes it work for the ISPs as well. You know, it needs to make financial sense, and so the system that is constructed is really aimed to be one that makes some financial sense.
So, okay, so let me make sure I'm saying it back to you correctly, right? Was when I've heard that discussion or seen that in the policy documents, that's more a reflection of if you're bringing in a third party, private, you know, a private party, that they're not going to sign up for this unless, you know, that they're going to be able to turn a profit, versus we as government agencies or service providers, that this is necessarily going to be profitable for us. It's probably a cost neutral activity.
Yeah, and I think there becomes the discussion on our side. So you're correct that yes, and we call it, you know, take rate is something that they talk a lot about. Are there going to be enough customers to actually take the rate in order to justify the operations? But then to our question being, what is our priority, you know, from a city standpoint, from the council's direction? What are the priority focus areas of where we want to see affordable and quality internet service soonest? And in some cases, it may not yet make financial sense for us to bridge that gap early, even though it makes social sense, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think, and I'll give you a couple pieces of feedback. Like, one of the things really supportive of the project, I know that we got to keep this thing going forward. Access to high-speed fiber and is really something that if we don't figure out, it's going to really hold us back economically. So I think getting this going is probably a really good idea. The one thing that's that is sort of pretty technical that I sort of see here is I just don't picture, you know, 3 or 4 customers or 3 or 4 providers investing all the infrastructure to wire, you know, a block of households. So we've got to figure out somehow how to get one set of infrastructure and then lease it out multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Agreed.
the third thing is just the emphasis on flexibility. Our goal is not to catch up to Eugene here, it's to be past Eugene. And with how fast technology changes, right, like just the normal amount of flexibility and adaptability, right? Like I know this is going to change in the next couple of years as we figure it out.
I appreciate that a lot.
Thank you.
And now I have Councillor Steer.
Courtney, I'm just confirming, what we're being asked to do now is approve a study to assess the feasibility of this project?
Yeah, we have the ability to do the study. I think we did some communication with you a while back. I think really to be very specific, we're also asking for your head nod that this study would be focused on a physical location in one of the city hall parking lots or on the city hall site. And so the next thing we would bring back to you is much more detail about who owns what and where and the cost for that discussion. And it would reflect a city hall site if you're okay with that.
Very good. Yeah, I'm in favor of moving forward on that. Thanks.
So, Steve, would you raise your hand?
Yes, I did. As soon as that money was available, the grant was available, I contacted the mayor and told her I wanted to get in on that. So she let me sort of go, and I contacted Sub and Jeff Nelson. Man, they're all over it. They know what's going on. They do have a network of their own out there right now, but John DeWinter just took off with it. And so they have a lot of information on this, and they're going to try and put together a team here, and I hope you let me be on it. So.
Thank you, Steve. And Councillor Woodrow.
Yeah, that was going to be my suggestion. Steve's already up to snuff on this. So I was going to be my suggestion to have him be the designated counselor to follow through since he's been involved to this point. So I go along with what Steve mentioned because I think that's a good choice.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I have a few comments. There's a questions I would like to have answered before I could support this. There's a few areas that haven't been addressed I've got some apprehension in some areas. Councillor Van Gordon kind of hit on it in regards to the take back, but it's my understanding that with excess media, that contract with Sub runs till 2028. And so they basically will have, if my understanding is, monopoly on this. And they also, they don't address, for example, what kind of rate control is in place for the customers. And if we have any say so, because we have the equipment, but do we have any say so on rates? Do we, does the city for sure, are we interested in owning some of that infrastructure? So, obviously it's going to be on our site, but I think we should own it and not hand that out. Also, in regards to the fees collection, if it's net zero versus going to be surprise cost down the road, what kind of guarantees we have that it is a net zero or zero cost for us down the road, or are we going to start getting invoiced down the road? Plus, and then infrastructure wise, I'm looking at, Courtney, I'm looking at the hotels you're talking about, and it looked like you had several kind of placed on that map, but physically, I assume that the square yellow dots is that the potential sites, I guess, what you're referring to right there, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I will say, really just illustrating more that while we're talking about this north corner, it could be in other spots. Those are not solidified by any stretch.
Gotcha. So that's up in the air where we can select that down the road. But I was also thinking too, is that now physically that is running from LCOG physically to us here downtown if we were to put this in. So I assume that route seems like it would make sense to not cross a river. So I assume that route would be going right straight through Glenwood to downtown here.
Yeah, that route already exists.
Okay.
Which is what's great, is it's already in place. There may be a couple different contracts required or agreements required in order to secure the route. But it does go through.
which is in my mind kind of cool in the sense that does that not show the ability to where that fiber could be tapped in with other hotels in the Glenwood area,
Yeah.
which would expand that. So
Yep.
it seems like that would make sense, and that is an option then, right?
Yes, I think to study, definitely. I think that's very much what we're thinking about.
So that could be two different economic districts. So then development districts. So then just out of a technical question, how big of a umbrella or cast of service does a hotel hub provide?
You know, honestly, I couldn't tell you that right offhand. It would be dependent on the different technology used by the different providers. So that's definitely a good question, and one that we have, but we don't know just yet. We do know that this location has brought multiple providers to the table with interest. So
Good. Okay.
That's an indicator to us, although they don't always like to tell us their magic tricks.
Okay. Well, so I like to see how their 10-year contract that started in 18, how that would, if that's going to, what kind of impact that is that going to limit really what we can do with a system that is not bound by contract, and what that contract, how does that basically third party bind us as well?
I think these are really good questions that I'm kind of noting. We have a lot of these questions too. I mean, ultimately, we know that where these go, they will be desirable based on how many potential customers exist. And the more customers, the more providers will want to participate, which creates competition. You know, I'll say with the Ambleside system, it's a very different business model because it's just leveraging physical assets that existed. Competition still exists in that neighborhood because Comcast and CenturyLink are also serving it. It just introduced one more. But this concept would potentially introduce a handful more at once, which is efficient. But I think we would learn more about how many residences they felt like they could efficiently serve.
Okay. Well, I mean, unless there's further questions, I support looking at it further. I'm not willing to commit as far as I'm concerned until we got some of those questions answered. I think it's a great theory and a great vision. But I think we should make sure we protect the end user and the city's interests. So as long as that's covered, and I assume that would probably be covered during a work group.
Yes, and these are really good. This is good guidance, and I'm appreciative of it because it definitely highlights the areas to really focus in on.
Great. Any other questions from the council? Okay, well, thank you so much, Courtney. That was amazing. A lot of information we covered in just those two topics.
I appreciate you all being graceful and patient with me on it.
Okay, so
thank you.
Thank you, Courtney. So our next meeting starts in 7 minutes. So we can all take a break. I think we can just turn our microphones and cameras off. If you want to take that 7-minute break, that way you just can turn it back on and be back in the meeting.
Hello again.
Hello.
How are you, Marilee?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing all right.
I'm much better now that the fire danger has subsided to minimal.
Yes. Are you back? Are you back in your place?
Yeah, I was back a week ago Saturday, but I anxiously awaited for him to get rid of that last level 1. So
Uh-huh.
Did you hear how fast United Catholic Community Services gave away $100,000 in fire relief?
yes.
And they were tapping it into $250 gift cards.
Yes.
What was that, Sean, again?
The Catholic Community Service gave out the first $100,000 in fire relief from that United Fund in direct cash assistance, and it was probably gone in 48 hours.
Wow.
But they did it in $250 gift cards.
That 100,000 will go quick like that.
Yeah, 100,000 is both a lot of money and not a lot of money for at that level at the same time.
Right.
Right.
Considering the number of people that were uprooted, yes.
Right. Well, I put in a request through some FEMA folks that last week in regards to whether or not there's the program or the ability for people that weren't actually burned out of their residence, so to speak, but the ones that were in zone 3 evacuation areas, that all their electricity was automatically shut down. And so there's a lot of people out there that lost their chest freezers and their refrigerators full of food that are spoiled. And they're victims of that fire. They didn't get burned out, they didn't get burned out. So that food, I think, should be reimbursed. I'm waiting for an answer back. I just asked it
Especially
Friday.
because they can't go back yet.
No, they didn't have any choice. So, which is nice that there's no longer any zone 3s in the entire area, and that the area of the actual fire area is now controlled by ODOT. It's the sheriff is pulled back, and there's 48 National Guard troops that are helping with the ODOT checkpoints, and they have specific times in which they will allow folks in, and they're all escorted, but it's shut down at night.
They can't travel. Isn't there an hour restriction for going in and out on 126?
Yeah, there's specific times that are travel times and are escorted, and they're trying to work towards a pilot car system. And because there was actually some more trees that fell across and some large rocks that fell across, and so they're not willing to let any night travel because of the inability to see it before it's too late.
And there's going to be for a while.
A long while. Yeah. In fact, they're talking that I think I got a quote from ODOT this morning that there's the danger. It's going to take so much and it's so extensive that it may take multiple months for it to be open to the public.
Right.
Like,
well,
maybe
that
16 to 18 months.
That one video that went through that showed the fire underground.
Yeah,
that was really scary. I mean,
yeah,
it was very eye-opening.
Yeah, they had an IR flight over last night at about 10 minutes after 10 that showed that there's just dots everywhere, and those are hot spots. And there's little dotted everywhere, but everything else is cooled off because of the rain.
Right. Yes, that rain was very nice. Very well timed.
I think I got like 1.47 inches of rain right smack dab in the middle of the corridor in 2 days.
Yes.
So, and the lightning didn't hurt much. There was nothing really, I think, to spark off. So.
Where's Sherry?
I don't know, but my iPad thought you were asking for Siri.
Oh, no.
I looked at that and I said, I didn't ask for you.
Hey, Siri.
No, stop it. My,
Siri.
stop it. All right. Sherry's
Hey,
here. So
Siri.
let's
Siri, what
get
minutes
rolling.
of capacity are we at with our grid?
All right. AJ, you there?
I am here.
All right. So now moving into regular session. And we'll do open with roll call, please.
Councillor Van Gordon,
Here.
Councillor Moe,
Here.
Councillor Moore,
Here.
Councillor Stair,
Here.
Councillor Woodrow,
Here,
and Councillor Pictionary.
I'm here, and let's go with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United
of the
States of
United States
America
of America
and to the
and
republic
republic
which it
for which it
stands,
stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under God,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with
with
liberty and
liberty
justice
and
for all.
justice for all.
Thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and read these instructions to the public. So as we begin our meeting tonight, I would like to ask members of the audience who are joining us by phone or online to please keep yourselves on mute until you are called to provide public testimony. There are 2 times designated for public testimony this evening. First, we will have public hearings, which will be a time for everyone to speak to the specific items listed on the agenda. After the public hearings conclude, there will be time listed as business from the audience. If you are joining us online with a tablet, smartphone, or computer and wish to speak either of those times, please use the chat window. It looks like a speech balloon in the upper right corner. Please send a comment to the organizer with your name, mailing address, and the subject you would like to speak about. You can select the organizer at the bottom of the chat window. I will call on you when it is your turn to speak. For people calling in by phone only, you are in listen mode only and cannot be called upon. The order of public testimony is as follows. Anyone in person in the council chambers, AJ will notify you. Anyone who has submitted a chat, and third, anyone who has submitted email in advance. If there is remaining time, Neil Ladati will read emails into the record. Okay, that said, so Springfield upbeat, we have nothing. Consent calendar.
I move that we,
Go ahead.
I move that we approve the consent calendar.
I'll second it.
It's moved and seconded by Councillor Woodrow and seconded by Councillor Moe. All those in favor signify with Neil taking the vote.
Joe, was Sherry trying to get in there? Was she? I don't know.
Well, I was wanting an explanation about one item. So can we pull one item?
Oh, on the consent calendar?
Yes.
Yeah, you'll need to identify specifically which one it is.
It's on the, it's the Correctional Health Partners, $42,717. The number is 1002546. And I
Okay.
believe it's the July disbursements, but I didn't write down the date. Sorry.
Okay.
Would you
Then
have
I
a
move that we
transaction?
approve, pardon?
I was just hoping that we'd have the transaction number or the, so that way that specific
Well,
item
I
could
have
be
the
answered to.
number. I do have the number I gave you.
Okay, so that's, staff has had enough information to be able to pull that and be able to speak about it.
Yeah, once we actually have Chief Lewis here in the audience and he can speak to this.
Okay. So that item being pulled,
I move to approve the consent calendar with the with a deletion or pulled item.
Second.
okay, it's been moved and seconded by Councillor Moe. All those in favor, please take roll on the vote, Neil.
Councillor Van Gordon,
Yes.
Councillor Moe,
Yes.
Councillor Moore,
Yes.
Counselor Stair,
Yes.
Counselor Woodrow,
Yes,
and Counselor Pictionary.
Yes. The motion carries unanimously. Next item.
shouldn't,
Do you want information on the pulled item?
Yes, let's go with that.
It was in the August disbursements.
Could you read the number one more time?
1002546. It's the Correctional Health Partners. I just had a question about whether or not that was an annual contract. Let me see if I can find it again. 46. Yeah, it was July inmate medical services. So then that made me wonder if that was an annual or is that a monthly? And so I just needed a little explanation for it.
You're on.
Council, Chief Lewis here. I think I can answer that question. We bill monthly, but it's an annual contract. So each month that's billed to the correctional health.
Was that $42,000 a month?
Yes, that's about right for last year's.
So I guess my question is that based on services or is that just a open, that's how much we pay?
That's how much we typically pay every month. If we ask for
Okay.
additional services, it can be a little bit more, but that's if we ask for something additional.
So is that a competitive bid or are we just lucky to get it for that cost amount of money?
Well, the original contract was done on a competitive bid. That's correct.
Okay. And when does that come up for bid?
Well,
Is it an annual?
one of the items on here is the contract to extend that contract for at least one more year.
Okay, well that was my question. So did we get other people who participated who bid on that contract or was that the only bidder was the Correctional Health Partners?
There was, if I remember correctly, there was one other bidder at that time. And that's going off my memory, and I'm not 100% sure of that, but I can get that information for you.
Okay, so it just seems like quite a bit of money to pay for healthcare services for less. I'm assuming we have still having less than 100 inmates.
Correct. With the COVID situation, we are less than that. There's no way to prorate it. Basically, that was the contract we did with them, and so it's based upon up to 98 inmates is the most, and the contract would still be the same, even if our average daily population stayed at, say, 50. Even if we ran at 90, then the contract stays the same.
So is that covering physical and mental issues? Does it cover the gamut, or what basically does it cover?
Yes, it does. And this is a little bit of an increase from the prior year because we went from 24 hours of the mental health provider to 32 hours.
Okay. So is it basically a nurse and an on-call doctor, or what exactly does it kind of involve?
It's an on-call doctor with a nurse, an RN to be kind of the overall person who's there 40 hours a week. And then it's staffed by either an LPN or a physician's assistant. And
like they're dispersing medications and taking care of any physical need type thing?
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate the answers. It was a big number and it jumped out at me and I just thought I'd like an explanation. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chief. And I think all of those are covered during the presentation when we approved that contract. And if possible, if there's more questions, maybe we can just send Sherry a copy of that agreement, and then that would be able to answer everything she may have. Okay.
do you want a motion to approve that now?
Yes, I do. If Sherry, that answers your question. Okay, I'll approve a motion to adopt or to approve that expense?
I so move.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilor Woodrow, seconded by Councilor Mo. All those in favor, Neil, if you take a vote roll call.
Yes, Councillor Van Gordon,
Yes.
Councillor Mo,
Yes.
Councillor Moore,
Yes,
Councillor Stair,
Yes.
Councillor Woodrow,
Yes.
and Councillor Pictionary.
Yes. Next item.
You have no public hearings tonight, so that would make your next item business from the audience. We do not have anyone here physically at City Hall. We have one hand raised, which means we'll call on that person and they will be able to speak. And then we actually have, I believe, 5 or 6 waiting. So if you could hold one moment, we'll get the first one.
Okay, just the comments or business from the audience is limited to 20 minutes. Please limit comments to 3 minutes. Speak cards are available at both entrances if you're there, and limit your comments to 3 minutes and you'll be advised on screen. AJ, I think you have something else that you say.
Nope, I think you've got it covered. We normally request them to state their name at the beginning along with their address. You are able to not list your physical address. You can provide your ward number. And I think that's it. If you don't have, if you are unable to see the timer on the screen and you are going over your 3 minutes, we will politely advise you that your time is up.
Thank you, AJ. So our first speaker, please.
Your first speaker is Lauren Williams with Ginny Osteen on deck. And Lauren, we will get your microphone turned on in just a second here. Okay, Lauren, you may need to unmute your microphone. There you go.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted. Yeah?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hi, thank you for taking my comment. My name is Lauren Williams. I live in Ward 2. I would really like to see council immediately fill the mayoral position through the end of this year, as it was stated in the last meeting by Councillor Moore. As it was stated in your last work session, we need to act swiftly and start making significant progress on some of the many problems our city faces. With respect, I know this year has been unprecedented, but as council, you have yet to meaningfully address Black Lives Matter and police reform. And I think that's woefully unacceptable. It was stated last week that council needed to choose from within itself because it would be too steep a learning curve for someone outside of council, but I don't think that's accurate. There are many people in this community who are competent, have experience in local government, and are abreast of what's currently happening. I would really like to see you open up the application process and hold public interviews, and to receive and listen to feedback from the community, and above all else, to foster democracy during this really turbulent time. Thank you. I yield my time.
Thank you very much. And I think I have Jenny Justine next.
We have Ginny Osteen next, and Ginny will get your microphone unmuted here in just a moment.
Osteen, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Ginny.
Good evening. My name is Ginny Osteen and I live in Ward 2. School board member Dr. Emilio Hernandez is at the school board meeting tonight and asked me to read this statement on his behalf. He also lives in Ward 2. This is in response to the previous council discussion on the process for selecting the new mayor. Right. These are restless times we are living in. We all need to work on a plan that will move all of us forward together. Accountability, equity, and inclusion are not, at this part of the council's communication to its constituents. You as the city council and we, the elected leaders in the community, need to set an example for our youth to keep them involved in their community and their future. The river divisiveness must go, along with the past council leadership. It's time for the council to step up and do what you were elected to do. Social justice is and needs to be accountable, equitable, and inclusive for the council to do the right thing. The mindset of the council that only you have the needed knowledge to serve the community is, to me, a bilingual former migrant worker with a PhD, insulting, classist, and worse, racist. People of color, women, LGBTQ, unhoused, unemployed, the abused, and the physically and mentally limited have not, and it appears will not, be given a voice in this process, which you are stating is, quote, your option. It is beyond me and our community that we do not get the respect to be involved in this critical decision. Remember these words: accountability, equity, and inclusion.
Thank you, Ginny. The next speaker is Chelsea Wilkes. And Chelsea, your microphone should be unmuted. You might have to unmute your own microphone.
Okay.
There you go.
Great, thank you. So my name is Chelsea Wilkes and I live in Ward 2. I want to thank you for the time that you're giving me here. Given the unique situation of having elected a mayor who understandably resigned before the beginning of the term they were elected to, I believe the people of Springfield should be allowed to weigh in on who should fill the role of the next mayor. Over the past year, we as a community have faced unprecedented crises. Clearly, one of the issues at hand is police reform. The next mayor must address the need for police reform. So far, the current city council members, sorry, I'm nervous, have only minimally addressed the issue, with multiple councilors stating that they stand firmly and unwaveringly behind the police. Given the polarized state of politics across the nation, this kind of one-sided reaction is understandable. However, it is unacceptable from our leaders. We need a leader who can acknowledge that problems exist within police culture and push for reform while building a bridge between police and the community. This will not be an easy task. It will take integrity and grace. Therefore, I believe a special election should be allowed, giving the people of Springfield the opportunity to elect someone who can complete this task. Thank you for the time. I yield it now. Thank you.
Thank you, Chelsea. The next speaker is Matt Salazar. And Matt, your microphone is unmuted. You might have to unmute on your side. There you go.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. My name is Matt Salazar, and I live in Ward 2. I'd like to comment tonight as well on the process of selecting our next democratically elected mayor. Support the idea of holding a special election in January 2021 to amend the city charter to allow for a public election of mayor in May 2021. I know this would be challenging, but I believe it is well worth the effort in order to have a democratically elected mayor months earlier than would otherwise be the case. As we all know, our city is facing many challenges, most importantly, how we continue to address the pandemic and hopefully soon begin to build back from its economic fallout. It is important that the citizens of Springfield have direct input into selecting the vision for this rebuilding as soon as possible. I personally would like to have the opportunity to choose my next mayor as soon as possible to address the issues that we all face as a community. Thank you, and I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you, Matt. The next speaker is Christy Costello. And Christy, your microphone is unmuted.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Yes, so my name is Christy Costello, and I live in Ward 2. And I am speaking tonight really to just express my support for casting a wider net in the mayoral appointment process. As others, I think tonight have already indicated, we have many leaders in our community who don't currently sit on council that I believe should have the opportunity to apply and be considered for the position. During the work session last week, there was a lot of discussion about how long each of you has been counselor and how that makes you uniquely qualified to be mayor. I would also like to ask, though, why we've heard very little from each of you individually and really nothing from the council collectively affirming and showing that Black Lives Matter. And I think, if you've been here for so long and have the requisite experience, what really have you done to address police accountability during your tenure? These are urgent and important conversations that our city really needs to be addressing and taking a stand on, but instead there's really been silence. And so I think in times of crisis, it's often important we consider a change in direction rather than maintaining status quo. And really right now, status quo is not working. It is not enough for what our city needs. So please cast a wider net and allow people to apply for mayor outside of current council members. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christy. Our next speaker is Holly Shaper. And Holly, your microphone is unmuted.
Great, thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. My name is Holly Shaper. I live in Ward 2. Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to comment. I want to ask each of you, who do we want to be as we move through the crises facing our society and our city? Do we want to maintain the status quo, or are we ready for change? Currently, under the status quo, we have seen our unhoused being denied access to housing during unprecedented wildfires and hazardous air, as well as being denied access to donations provided so generously by the communities for those in need. We have seen BIPOC folks coming to donate goods being harassed and threatened by members from the quote-unquote patriot group. We have seen the protest in Thurston where peaceful protesters were brutalized by both the Springfield police as well as the pro-police demonstrators, sending a resounding message that BIPOC families are not safe or welcome in Springfield. We have had no response or resolutions based on the Black Lives Matter movement around police accountability. The council offers little to no oversight of the Springfield Police Department. So, is this who we are? Is it who we want to be? I know it isn't who I want to be, and it isn't the direction I'd like to see in a city where I have chosen to live. With the choice of the next mayor, we will be setting in motion the path that our city will choose for the next 2 years. Will the next mayor continue along the path we are on, perpetuating the existing culture, or will they be ready to change it? I mentioned last week the need for a leadership team and someone in the role of mayor who can foster that, who can recognize and nurture each person's strengths while also recognizing that there are weaknesses or conflicts of interest that need to be addressed for the good of our community. The best way to find this mayor is to let democracy work as it is supposed to and let the people of Springfield have a voice in the selection of their leadership. Why not have a special election, amend the city charter, and then allow an open election for mayor to be held? If the dual special election process is not chosen, the very least that council could do is to open up the application, interview, and selection process to all those who are eligible to serve and not limit applicants to sitting councilors. While sitting councilors may have their own visions for the city, why not allow the field of applicants to be broader so that other potential visions for Springfield's future can be heard and evaluated? If a current councilor is appointed through this broader process, it will lend more credibility than if one of 6 people are appointed by a vote of those same 6 people without additional applicants. In closing, I strongly urge council to research and attempt the dual special election process for true democracy. with the bare minimum choice being an open application process with robust public input, including a committee to advise on the appointment. Thank you.
Thank you, Holly. Council, I think we have one more speaker. Dana Hirschert. Dana, your hand was raised, the virtual hand, but I don't see it up anymore. So I'm going to activate your microphone. If you would still like to speak, you would just unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, and my apologies, Dana, I missed your hand. I apologize.
Oh, it's okay. Hi, thank you for the opportunity to comment. My name is Dana Herkett, and I live in Ward 1. I'm here to comment about the mayoral appointment process after listening to the council discussion last week. I want to express support for creating a committee to advise about the mayoral appointment and also for allowing anyone who is eligible to apply. A current councilor is appointed through this process. It will lend more legitimacy to the appointment since it would have allowed for a more democratic process. Additionally, I would hope that any councilor who is interested in serving as mayor would want the public to have a voice in this process. It would open it up to anyone who is eligible and wants to apply. Thank you.
Thank you. Council, we have one more hand raised. Carolyn Raish. Carolyn, I can. Your microphone
Can you hear me?
is now. Yes.
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to comment. My name is Carolyn Rashi, and I live in Ward 3. I'm speaking tonight in support, as many of my fellow citizens, of using a democratic process to select our next mayor. It seems from the discussion last week that the seated 6 city councilors would choose one of their own, only using their votes. This is a bad idea. Springfield has a population of approximately 70,000 people who would be disenfranchised from selecting their community's next leader. I'm going to say quite frankly that in the last months and even in the past years that there's been a failure in leadership in the city. For example, with all city councilors serving, Springfield was unable to open a shelter last week for unhoused to breathe clean air, and despite hazardous conditions over a course of days. When I called the city, I was told the city was working on it, and that failed to come to fruition. After years of lawsuits, whistleblowers, and open knowledge of the issues with Springfield Police Department, and as the ink was drying on the Kenny settlement, police escalated and created a violent confrontation with peaceful protesters. I mention this because I understand as a lawyer that you might not want to discuss Thurston openly, as it seems there might be some future lawsuits. However, it's clear that the lack of oversight by the City Council and the Springfield Police Advisory Committee has created an issue that we cannot avoid any longer. This issue existed before the death of George Floyd. In city council meetings, I consistently hear a city council that is unable to talk about equity issues and honestly seems frightened to talk about race at all. And then at last city council meeting, I heard a lot of talk, but an inability to take any decisive action or have a forthright conversation about the mayoral appointment process. It seemed that city council settled on what would be easy, but certainly not what is best for the city. So like many others, I strongly disagree that the city councilors are uniquely qualified to serve as mayor. I know that this council needs new ideas and actual leadership. And given this challenging time with so many issues facing the city, including affordable housing, COVID health issues, unexpected budget shortfalls, and the overdue need for police reform, we don't need to remain stagnant. It's not only harmful to the citizens you serve, but it's also becoming a very expensive proposition for the city of Springfield. There are many potential candidates with a life and professional experiences beyond being a currently seated city councilor, many who have dedicated their lives to public service and are leaders in our community. We shouldn't exclude these talented and motivated individuals that may have a compelling vision for our city's future. So I ask that you involve the community in making the decision for the next mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Council. That appears to be all our speakers. I don't see anyone left anyone in the council chambers and no hands raised. So I believe that's everyone.
Okay, thank you, Neil. So next on the agenda.
Next item would be business from the City Council.
So I see Steve followed by Sherry, and I have a few comments. So go ahead, Steve.
I'm on Well, two committees we already talked about tonight, and that's the downtown electric and the fiber. So you already know where those are going. But my other comment is we had that ugly experience in July. I'm appalled at that. I support Black lives. I support the right to protest. I support all minorities. And I never expect to see behavior as we all saw. It was videotaped. It was disappointing and disgusting. We were told an unbiased investigator from outside the area would investigate and reveal exactly what happened. I don't know where that is. I'd like to see that moving along and at least get that solved. But as far as, well, anyway, I'm going to stop with that for now.
Thank you, Steve. I think actually maybe Nancy, can you update us on that?
Yes, I can, counselors. Thank you. We are in the process of finalizing a contract with outside investigator through the city attorney's office. And this independent investigator is, I can get some more information out to you as the council, but has a background in law enforcement, but also now does consulting on use of force and crowd management. He was involved with doing an after incident report in Ferguson, Missouri, just to give you some context of his breadth of experience. And I'd be happy to, once we have that finalized, send it out to the council along with his resume.
Thank you. So Steve, it's moving right along.
Yeah, I just want to be more open to the public. We are working on it. We take it serious. It's a very serious thing.
And I think I had Sherry Moore next, followed by Councilor Steer.
Yes, I just wanted to comment about the letter we received from Johannes and Jenny Potter Tato from Safer and Escudo concerning some of the things that they'd like to see happen with the police department. And I appreciate very much the response from Chief Lewis as well. And just wanted to let people know that we have read the letter and their concerns. And I did appreciate that Chief Lewis had responded to that as well. So thank you to them. And then also I sent out an email, or had AJ sent out an email concerning the meeting that I went to for land workforce last week. So there was information there, a lot of great information about what's going on concerning the tremendous lack of employment that we're experiencing in the city and some of the problems that we're dealing with businesses, and how Lane Workforce is right in there working with solutions to those issues. And I really appreciate the work that they're doing. And I too want to say that I was disappointed in seeing the videos that I saw concerning the incident in July. And I do think that we need to start listening. I realize that COVID, creates all sorts of problems for opening it up to the community and listening, but I do want that we should move forward in that area so that the community knows that we do care and that we're involved and we do want to respond to them. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Moore. And I think, was it Councilor Steer? I think, did you have a comment? Go ahead.
Yes, I was just going to report what the city manager just did about the finalizing of a contract with an outside investigator. And let me say that I, like everyone who's seen the tapes of what happened in the Thurston area during that march, was I think was appalled at what happened, and we're looking forward to a thorough investigation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Steer. Any other comments from others? Go ahead, Councilor Van Gordon.
Could we go back to the contract for a second, Nancy? If it's going to be a couple weeks before you sign it, what's going to be, I guess, the time horizon before we would see the final report, talk about it in public, so that the public that's listening can, kind of understand the time frame that we're looking at?
So I'm going to ask Mary Bridget if that has been executed yet. We were doing some final negotiations on a couple of items. I don't know if it has been signed.
Hi, it's Mary Bridget. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So we have been working with the independent reviewer, and he has a final version of the contract. We're just waiting for it to come back and get signed. And then what we did was left the scope of work for the contract part of the public input part of the contract relatively open, depending on how the report goes. The term of the contract is through January, which is a long time, but I wanted it to be long enough to make sure he had enough time to get his work done. It was going to initially be through December, but with the fire, we had some delay in getting him his materials. He's requested a long list of materials and information to review. Then he'll draft a written report that the council and the public will see. And then he also is under contract to do either, depending on COVID restrictions or how the city manager and the council want to approach it, some kind of community input or meeting or information out. But we left that somewhat open, just seeing how far along we get in the investigation. So I'm anticipating I'll have the contract back any day signed, and then we'll move forward.
Councilors, I'd just like to add to that, if I may. One of the things that I discussed with the consultant was the potential for having some kind of an online forum for people to provide their input to him as he does his investigation. We received, a number of emails and concerns and calls, and I know you all have too, from people. And based on that input, we kind of thought it might be appropriate to do like a large Zoom call or something along that nature, where people could either submit questions in writing or, he could talk about his philosophy. Nothing that would, necessarily detract at all from the investigation, but that people could be heard and know that he is looking at every potential avenue in this investigation.
Thank you for that. I think that being as transparent as possible with the timeline in the public is going to be helpful, because I want to make sure people understand this thing's not going to get lost. It just is going to take a little bit of time. I got a couple other things, but Marilee, I didn't know if you had questions specific to this or if you were.
No sound.
Again, just that specifically, as transparent as we can be. I know the comment was made that we haven't been, but we haven't had anything to say. We were all reacted. We all were concerned about what happened. We wanted to see, what the consultant had to say. And it wasn't like we weren't being concerned, but we didn't have anything to respond with, other than our concern and over what happened. So I'm looking forward to the consultant's report and how we can move on from the information that we gather from that as a community. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Sean.
So while we're sort of keeping with the policing questions, I had one question, maybe two questions about the memo that Chief Lewis sent. I thought it was a fairly good memo in response to the questions that Johannes had about how we move forward as a community. I'm in favor of the business cards. I think it's a simple idea that we could do, but it was very unclear based on the memo if that was something that that was gonna happen.
I think it has. Chief, is that correct?
Just give Chief a moment to get back up to the front.
It seems shorter when we can't see, when we don't see him wandering up from the crowd.
Yeah. So to answer your question, Counselor, all our officers have business cards. I think the question that the Safer group posed is that it would be mandated that on every single encounter, the officer would hand the card to whoever they're talking to. But currently, the practice is all officers have business cards, and if someone wants their business card, they should have that. So that becomes kind of the issue. There is a cost factor to this. I'm not going to sit there and say it's astronomical or anything like, but we probably could add another $10,000 to every encounter, and want to be careful about policies that's produced that requires officers to hand out cards on every single interaction as the first thing they have to do or sometime during that interaction.
Well, yeah, and I'm not so concerned about the sort of the how, right? But the idea that you could sit down with an officer or have an encounter with an officer and not be sure what the like who I had an encounter with just leads to confusion in the community. So like I'm not saying that I'm like I've got an opinion on how you get it done. I think you need to figure out a way to get it done so that people are sure that who they talk to, you know, and they have that person's contact information.
Sure, and if I could just add to that, besides the business card being one aspect of that, every single encounter is recorded in our CAD system, our computer-aided dispatch. And so anytime if you know the date and time or even the approximate date and time or location, we can go back and figure out if a citizen calls in, has a concern with their interaction with an officer, we can figure out that particular call for service and figure out who the officer was. Also, all the vehicles have AVL, and we can go back and do it that way. Also, figure out which particular patrol car was at a given location. So, if somebody has a concern and they don't remember the officer's name or something like that, I always encourage them to call down because we can figure it out based upon the CAD or the AVL system.
Yeah, so Chief, and I would just encourage you guys to keep looking at this, right? Because like I thought the business cards were a good idea, and it may be as simple as just explaining to people how they go about getting that information. I get a lot of calls, you know, obviously since the summer, where people just aren't sure like even where to start to interact with the police to track down that information.
Okay, so I have Councilor Moe followed by Councilor Woodrow.
I want to make sure that whoever the police encounter know that the card is available. They may not take it, but I want them to feel comfortable that the officer is willing to identify him to them, because they're pretty nervous in that situation, and they may take it, may not, but I want the public to freely know that they're available.
Okay, we can definitely do that.
And Councilor Woodrow. Speaker, microphone, there you go.
I was looking at it from another angle. I know that I went up to a day-long thing about community policing and having good positive contacts with the community. So coming at it from another angle and not necessarily handing someone a card so that they know who to identify, but coming at it from the angle of it being a positive. Whereas, you know, hey, if you need something about this, or you need to know more, or you need, you know, more from a positive. I realize when the police stop you or when you have an encounter with them, it probably starts out with a negative and isn't necessarily a positive, but still knowing who they interacted with, they can walk away with that assurance that they had that interaction and know who they not have. It's not up to them to try to figure out who they encountered with, but the encounter starts with the police, and it has a positive action by handing them a business card saying, this is who I am. I just not really going against what you're saying, Rick. I'm just adding to it that I think that it can add to add a little bit of positivity or reassurance to who they're interacting with.
Sure, and I think I understand. I'll see if I can put something together and get it back to the council to see if I'm capturing what you are asking for.
Thank you.
So,
sorry, Joe. Go.
Oh, go ahead, Sean.
And the other one that I had a question about was the language piece. Like, is that actually a best practice from policing? Like, I just don't know. Like because I think in the memo you had said that, like, essentially if you request a different translator, they get it, or if somebody infers that you need, or that you're going to need translation, that at a stop, then they'll call back for it. Is that the best practice?
Yeah, I think if on a routine traffic stop, I think if we have an officer or an employee on duty that can do translation, we'll bring that individual out there. If that's not available, the second option is the language line. The officer contact and do it that way. And that is the typical practice around the country.
Okay.
Thank you, Chief. Yeah, and I think just my personal knowledge, Language Line, they have 158, I believe, 158 different languages available. So they should have anything covered that we can't. And plus the staff are paid a premium pay for being tested for their fluency on a particular language, and they get premium pay for that too, if I'm correct, Chief.
Correct. It's 5% now is what
right.
they actually.
So, and that, you know, I'm just going to reiterate what all the council has said, Chief, and it's really a matter of it has got to be some very concise and direct training that for our officers, and I know a lot of them are doing it already, but I think that we need to emphasize to our officers that anytime, and based on my background too, is that anytime you are concluding a contact, whether it started negative or started positive or ended negative and ended positive, it doesn't matter, that everybody likes to know that at the end of that, a professional person would say, hey, look, if you know, here's my card if you want it, and if you have any further questions or concerns about this, or if you have any more questions that you didn't think about while I spoke with you, be sure to call me and I will help you out. I mean, it's that ending point for any good positive contact that needs to be made. And I understand the safety issues, and you can't, you know, obviously if there's a, you know, whatever bad issue going on, that you're not going to stop and talk about cards, but there's always an opportunity when that is over, when that's terminated. And even if for example, it's better for another officer that wasn't involved in that contact, if it was negative, to have another officer at least offer it up at that time, because sometimes you don't have good communications or worthy communications with a negative contact. But I really think that it's a training issue, and that shouldn't be difficult. And again, I emphasize that every encounter, every person that asks for a card, and every officer should be offering those cards instead of necessarily waiting to be asked.
Okay.
Is that kind of what the council is talking about? Sherry, go ahead.
So today I did take an opportunity to go down and look at some of the photos that the SAFER memo was relating to as well. And one of the things that Chief Lewis mentioned was the statement, the department's value statement that was made. And he showed me that on the wall, and it was really well done. And I was wondering if that might not be something that could be posted out in the lobby when people first come in to the police department, because it really does say a lot about who Springfield Police Department, who we are as a Springfield Police Department. And it would be nice if that was available to the public. I realize your officers see it as they come and go. So that would just be my suggestion, Chief.
Okay, we can definitely look into that. I think there's plenty of space on those big walls in the lobby area. We can probably find some space for that.
Don't touch the canines.
we won't.
Of course, that's hallowed ground for Councilor Woodrow. So, okay.
Sorry, Friday, we had housing governance meeting last week. Steve and I did. Friday, LCDC is having a public hearing about the rules making for HB 2001. Between the two of us, we're going to arm wrestle about who's going to submit testimony. And it's going to be along the same lines that we've talked about with transportation and a lot of things at the state level right now, which is just asking for a little bit more clarity on goals, but leave us a lot of options to decide as a community what works for us.
Thank you for that. That's good. Is that similar to the MPC? Gotcha.
Yeah. I point, like when we talked to the planning staff, we pointed to them back to that NPC written testimony as a good framework because I thought the issues were similar.
Yep, I think they are. Okay. Anyone else? Excellent. So next item, please, Neil.
Next item is business from the city manager. Item number 1, a resolution amending Resolution 2020-29 to extend the state of emergency due to the continuing emergency response to the Holiday McKenzie fire. Resolution number 2, a resolution amending Resolution 2020-29 to extend the state of emergency due to the continuing emergency response to the Holiday Farm McKenzie fire. And City Manager Nancy Newton is here for the report.
Good evening, councilors. Very quickly on this resolution. So essentially, we need to extend the resolution in order to enable us to continue to receive funding reimbursement from FEMA. And so for our response efforts, we're still doing things out of our emergency operations center, and so we're looking to get reimbursed for our staff time for that. One important thing to note on this resolution is that it removes the restrictions that were there prior about having like an outdoor barbecue or using hand tools or equipment capable of producing a spark that could cause a fire. So that restriction is removed, but the resolution would still be in play. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Nancy. I have Councilor Woodrow.
Just a comment. I was glad to see that removed. I know that it restricted some folks out there working, and it was warranted at the time, but I was glad to see it removed because now that there's a lot of people out there that can get back to work. So.
Thank you. Yeah, and I agree. I fully support this. So I would entertain a motion unless someone else has more comments.
I move to approve resolution number 2.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilor Woodrow, seconded by Councilor Van Gordon. All those in favor signify by saying yes to Neil when he calls your name.
It was Councilor Mo that seconded.
It was
me. I know we look alike.
Councilor Pictionary, just to confirm, it was Councilor Woodrow and then Councilor Mo with the second.
Oh, okay.
Councilor Van Gordon.
And I shouldn't have said, I'm sorry, I'll interrupt just a second. I shouldn't have said signify by answering yes to Neil. I shouldn't tell you how to vote. Signify with your vote to Neil. Thank you. Go ahead, Neil.
Councilor Van Gordon.
Since Pish has confused me so much, I'm going to need another minute. Yes.
Councilor Mo.
Yes.
Councilor Moore.
Yes.
Councilor Stair.
I have not been coerced at all, and I vote yes.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Yes.
And Councilor Pictionary.
Yes, and thank you, Nancy, for bringing us forward and alternating this or making it alternative. Thank you.
Any other business from the city manager?
No further business. Thank you.
And any business from the city attorney?
On behalf of Mary, I'm sorry, Mary Bridget. You go ahead.
Right. No business from the city attorney. Thanks.
Thank you.
Sounded like AJ wanted to say something.
I think we're good. No other business from the city.
No business from the city recorder. I received a message from Mary Bridget saying she had no business, and I thought her mic was not working, so I apologize for the interruption.
No worries. On that note, I'm going to adjourn this meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Later.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.